welcome back to Cut Loose, where we tell tales of adventures and life after work. My name's Martin, and as promised, from my Wicken Fen playlist, this is one about the Wicken Fen Boardwalk. I hope you enjoy it. Perhaps I ought to point out at this stage, before we go any further, that there isn't some weird continuity thing going on here. These recordings were done between March and around about June of 2022, so yeah, you're not seeing things. This pond in front is part of a network of around about 6 old brickworkings. The clay is very close to the surface here, and it's the clay that the brickmakers were after. They dug these big pits around about 1870, 1880, and they continued only for a short period of time until the very early 1900s, when these pits and the adjacent brick kiln fell into disuse. I think you'll agree they've turned into really, really nice habitats now, though. This is another one of the brick pits, and this particular day was quite chilly, but it's still a lovely place to sit and reflect. Lovely and peaceful. Now, after leaving the brick pits, if you're staying on the boardwalk, you retrace your steps a little bit, and you enter an area of scrub, technically known as carr, C-A-R-R. Carr is wet woodland, and this is a very significant habitat at Wicken, although up until 20 years ago, about 75% of the site was covered in it. That wasn't very favourable, so we removed about 120 acres of it, and we left significant clumps, such as the bit you see in front of you now. Now, on any visit to Wicken Fen, you see a lot of these gizmos. This is a dip well. We have them scattered over large parts of the nature reserve, and they record the water table. So once a month we come along, we measure what the water table is, it's recorded, and then put on a database, and we have data going back some, well, I think we've been doing it for 40, 50 years. But way back in the 1920s and 30s, Sir Harry Godwin and Arthur Townsley, when they were establishing their principles of conservation and ecology, were also measuring water table. So we've got water table information over 100 years now. Looks a bit like a periscope, but that's just the catch at the front so that rainwater doesn't get in there. This is a clearing about a quarter of the way, third of the way around the boardwalk. It's got quite an interesting history. Within the clearing is a pond, quite a small one, although you can't see it amongst this vegetation. And it was created in the 1960s when Colonel Mitchell was the sort of head warden at Wicken Fen. Now, the Colonel wanted a new pond, so he got in touch with his old mates in the Royal Engineers at Waterbeach, and they sent over a group of sappers with explosives. They set the charges off, and apparently this huge gout of peat shot into the air and came tumbling back down into the same hole, so they had to do it all over again. They did eventually get it right, and now we have a pond. Now, this down here is called lady's smock. It's also known as cuckoo flower, so named because it appears when the cuckoos return in the spring. Now, the bird you can hear rattling around in the background is a reed warbler. Sounds very much like a sedge warbler, but no, this is a reed warbler because, well, we saw it. Whilst I was doing this, I've just noticed the remnants of an experiment that was probably, I'm pretty sure it would have been something by Harry Godwin in the 1920s and 30s. And there's the little bit of equipment that got left out here. It's a piece of what looks like aluminium fixed to an old post that's deep in the ground. Harry Godwin, grandfather of conservation, and did a lot of his experimental work at Wicken Fen, and that's probably something that he's left behind. As you get through the scrub, you emerge out onto the sedge fen again, and you get that wonderful sense of openness. This must be what the fens would have felt like. Vast, vast areas of open space, and this would have been prior to drainage in the sort of 16th century. Where the boardwalk turns sharp left, it's worth just hanging around there for a few minutes to soak it all in. Though it's a bit breezy today, there is a lot of bird song sort of activity this morning. Yesterday was quite a grubby day. It rained for a large proportion of the day. It certainly would have discouraged the sort of amorous antics of most of the birds. So of course once you get even half decent weather, everything sort of wakes up and comes straight back into life, and it's all sort of systems go again. This is another cuckoo flower, tenaciously poking its head out from the side of the boardwalk. One of the questions I'm often asked is about how we manage the fen. Well, the first thing to point out is that we have two distinct types of management at Wicken. The old fen, which is what you can see in front of you here, the management is very prescriptive. Further afield, on Adventurous Fen, for instance, the management is much more holistic and along the lines of rewilding. Now, I hope to cover the management in a separate vlog, but in very basic terms, we have three different cutting rotations on the old part of the fen. We have an annual cut, which is in the autumn. We have a 3-year cut, which is in the summer. And we have a 4-year cut, which is in the winter. But as I say, I'll explain that in a bit more detail later on. I should mention the piles of cut material that you can see in front of you. These are known locally as litter piles, litter being marsh hay. To entomologists, these things are known as Duffy piles, named after the guy that recognised that these piles of sort of compost, as it were, are actually fantastic homes for invertebrates and also somewhere for snakes and lizards to hibernate through the winter. Now, not for the first time, I'm incredibly frustrated the fact that I don't have a decent camera for wildlife footage. I've missed so much while I've been doing these vlogs. But if I can find it out in the distance there is a female marsh harrier. The females are considerably larger than the males. Oh, and here comes the male to join her. Apologies for this, they're really not easy to see, but as this is my phone, it's about the best I can do. Sorry about that. Now, in an attempt to clear up a little bit of confusion, we sometimes get visitors commenting that they've seen hen harriers in June, July. Now, any self-respecting hen harrier by the time you get to June, July is either in Scandinavia or at the very least in the northern parts of Scotland. The fact is, male marsh harriers can look very, very grey and can look, at a glance, like a male hen harrier or even a Montagu's harrier. So in June, July, a really quick and dirty way of telling the difference is that hen harriers and Montagu's harriers have very, very pale bodies, white, very pale grey bodies. Marsh harriers have a chestnut coloured body. So if you can see underneath the bird, ignore underneath the wings, just have a look at the body. And if it's got a chestnutty brown body, then it's a marsh harrier. Got a pale body, then it could well be a Montagu's harrier. We get Montagu's harrier at Wicken Fen very, very occasionally. The last one I saw was about 6 years ago. But it is extremely unlikely to be a hen harrier at that time of the year. In the winter, it would most likely be a hen harrier. Hen harriers roost at Wicken Fen during the winter. Now, after you've crossed the open fen moving towards Wicken Lode, you'll start to see a wind pump appearing on the horizon. This is one of two that we have on site. The first one you may have noticed in the first few minutes of this vlog. That one is a wooden structure. This one here is more, well, I wouldn't say 21st century, it's probably 18th century, but the materials are modern. I'm going to touch on these wind pumps in much greater detail in the vlog that I hope to do about the management of the site, because these all relate to the site's hydrology. However, in a nutshell, these aren't really here to get the fen wet, they're more to try and keep the chemistry right. Unlike upland peat, which is acidic, Wicken Fen is a series of calcareous habitats. Now, because it stands higher than the surrounding farmland, there is a danger that Wicken Fen could turn from a calcareous habitat into something that's slightly more acidic. This could happen if the fen was fed more by rainwater than groundwater. To counter that, we use these wind pumps to put calcareous water into the fen, and this helps to redress the balance. Once I got to the area of the boardwalk adjacent to Wicken Lode, I found this chap. Clearly it was just emerging, and I'm not sure it had actually finished sort of reforming itself, so to speak. So it's very difficult to tell what it was. But I think it's a female common darter. But if anybody knows any different and can put me right, I'd appreciate those comments. Thank you. I waited for a fair old while, hoping to see it take wing, but with battery getting flat and the need to do some work becoming pressing, I decided it was time to leave. Before I hot-foot it back to get on with some work, I just want to walk along Wicken Road a little bit to the Great Ouse Boating Association moorings. Now these moorings are part of the nature reserve. They are a site of special scientific interest. They are part of the NNR. They are part of the SAC, the Special Area for Conservation, and they're also designated under the Ramsar Convention as part of an internationally important wetland. Now, we give the Great Ouse Boating Association licence to moor up to 5 boats at these moorings. And what a fantastic place it must be as well. All we ask is that people respect the site. In fact, once Eve and I have purchased our narrowboat, this is one of the places that we want to come and moor up for a few days. And now, back we go. And so, with a short walk through some more woodland completed, we emerge back out in the open fen. Over the other side you'll see the familiar wooden wind pump, and to your right the now familiar visitor centre. So then, if you've enjoyed this little trip around the boardwalk, please subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up, and if you want some notification of future programmes, ding that old bell.